Okay, I'm gonna just present a bit it's just a sort of inspiration to start the conversation. But a theme that the way we presented this project and sort of the frame to start to discuss and write is darkness and what this idea of this thing which I call the sort of the enemy inside, I called it. So
enemy.
Enemy, yes.
Yeah.
I can tell a bit more about what I mean about that. It's also connected to my experience of course, coming from the south of Europe to the north of Europe. And it's connected to the relationship between the environment outside, and how we then listen and relate to the environment inside. So the perception of yourself inside yourself, and the perception of yourself as and your potential in the world outside. So the idea is to sort of reflect on this. When I moved to Norway, I felt that you meet a society which is apparently free from problems. When you see it from where I come from, and you also meet actually a lot of people that are not really. They talk about also their society as quite free from problems, which is kind of scary. And if you see, for example, Oslo also, and if you see like Norwegian cities, and if you see sort of the way they are homogeneous, the way they are, the way like when I came to Oslo, it almost felt like Oslo had no sort of perfume, like the city doesn't smell.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you have this urbanization which is totally ascetic. Like sometimes you feel you walk inside an hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and things are functioning and moving, and there are very little paradoxes also in the environment. I mean, there is a harmonic relationship, even though the nature is strong, but it's not terrifying, because there is a sort of harmony between the way Norwegians have organized their nature, and the way they have organized their cities, and the way things are cleaned up, are organized, and there is also this rhetoric about a society that has achieved a lot of good results, and there is a very established politically correct. There are sort of structures for dealing with problems like likestilling, equality between men and women. There are quotering, a lot of things that are sort of. They give a feeling that things are sort of dealt with. And this, I think, is when I moved here, also from an artistic point of view, and I had to sort of think, can I live in this place? One of the first questions was, can I act in this place? Mm-hmm. Can I be an artist in this place? Mm-hmm. Do I mean something about this place? Mm-hmm. And the first approach was like very terrifying about this, because so what is your place if there's nothing to do in the society, if you can't make society better, or if you can't contribute to society? It's just to sort of function within these structures. And then I realized that outside of this organized system, there was anyway a lot of unhappiness. There was a lot of darkness, in a way, which was not dealt with. And that's why I came with this idea of this thing about the enemy inside, that when you have a society that creates a rhetoric that's basically sort of convinced the people that there is no enemy outside, that there is nothing to change, nothing to fight against, or nothing to sort of problematize, then you're left alone with the problem of your own happiness, the problem of your own realizing yourself as a person, the problem of functioning within the society. So if you don't function, it's unique, your own personal problem. And and I found that very fascinating, because then I called this sort of I saw that this enemy inside them was very strong. I mean, the fear of that there is something wrong with me if I can't function, if I can't be happy, if I can't realize myself, if I can't achieve, for example, if you see also in the art world how important it is to be working within institutions, to be accepted, to get good critiques, you know, how the relationship it was between the professional theater and the non-professional, between the institutionalized and the not institutionalized. I mean, these categories were very rigid in my perception when I came here. And I found that very terrifying, because it's almost like the only thing that can go wrong is you, and is inside you. And so that was for me a sort of the darkness behind the brightness of this society, which is in many ways has achieved, I guess, a lot of great things objectively, coming from a country like Italy, where I come from, which is a living paradox, but also I had the possibility to reason about this living paradox, how sort of calming and reassuring it was to grow up in a society where ugly and beautiful coexist, where good and evil coexist, where you can decide on which part you wanna be. You can decide if you wanna be idealistic and act in the society to try to make change, or if you wanna be a pragmatist and act just to survive. You know, where all these choices are outside of you in terms of the potential in the space, the potential in the environment. In a way, this takes so much away the focus from your own flaws. You know, it's not very much about if something doesn't go, you can always try to find a justification or a reason for that, which is not you. And in a way, this was very reassuring. Also, the question of talent was not so important. The questions of doing wrong was not so important. Yeah, I became sort of aware of this other side of that culture that I've always sort of been also frustrated with, which is my own Italian culture. And so it was like sort of this, for me it was like this meeting darkness, not as the light darkness, but the darkness of having to look all the time inside me. Am I enough? Am I good? Do I have enough talent? Do I have enough resources? Am I going to be accepted? And as a foreigner, for example, moving to Norway, it's a very strong barrier you have to break in terms of just to have your competence to be accepted, your background to be accepted, to have a sort of to really penetrate the society.
It's like a membrane.
Yeah.
Invisible sort of.
Yeah, because one thing is to get here and get a sort of job and manage yourself, which is not penetrating in the society. It's sort of being at the borders of it, and make a living, some sort of an economy that makes you survive. But the other thing is to really penetrate the society and find your voice in the society, be accepted, being seen and perceived as part of the society, having the possibility to reach a place where you can be a critical voice. This I found it extremely problematic in Norway. Like a lot of Norwegians that were very open to talk about, for example, problems of Italy, but they were not very open to talk about contradictions I found in Norwegian society. They found that very sort of aggressive in a way. A lot of things that I like now there was sort of internalized a mechanism of defending also the choices of the Norwegian society and the Norwegian state, almost like if they were your own private choices, you know, like if there is no, but if it's like this, it's because there is this, it's good in a way, you know. And also like this sort of, as you say, membrane of, yeah, you're welcome here, but don't have meanings about here, don't criticize here, don't. which was a sort of, for me in the start, was a very interesting process, because can I be here? Do I have meanings about here? And if I have meanings, is it possible for me to talk them out or to act from those meanings? And so this process of sort of integration went through these aspects, and then I found this other aspect of this. These other aspect of darkness. These are apparent. There is a lot of politically correctness very well established, and the fight for equality between men and women has in many ways come more far, and a lot of in many fields it seems very democratic, but at the same time there are some mental structures that are so strong about, for example, the idea of consensus, that when you make a change, that change has to go through consensus, which I found, like when I started to work also, for example, here, I found a sort of anti-democratic idea. I mean, why should we have consensus? And consensus is an utopia. We can't have consensus. The moment we have consensus, we are sort of borderline dictatorship, because it means that you want to take away all the critical voices, and it was impossible to go forward with any change or any proposition, even though we were in a room and there were 3 people wanting to do something, one person was critical. We couldn't move on, because we have to work until 4 people think the same, which was a sort of demagogic understanding of democracy, I felt. And this, as I said, this sort of self-censorship to sort of have internalized a lot of barriers, a lot of things that this will be perceived as too provoking, or this is too much of a statement, or this is too much of, as you were talking about when you gave the example of this censorship, a lot of times I experience a sort of internalized censorship, like nobody's asking you not to do it, but you
are really stupid if you do.
Yeah, and also, but you
if
also
you don't
believe
get that,
into this.
If you don't get that, you really have a problem.
Yeah, and the problem of creating a problem. How problematic it is to create a problem, which I also found another aspect of this sort of enemy inside. And then of course I started to work with the students, and I've seen now in these years different generations of these young Norwegian actors, and the main work is really to talk to them and to really get to listen to this self-censorship they have inside. All these ideas of what they cannot do is much bigger of what they think they can do. And how do they internalize these structures? How do these structures are getting reproduced? How do actually also sometimes theater and culture in this country also help to reproduce certain ideas everywhere, but also here, to reproduce certain ideas that are sort of really, there's a legacy of these mental structures that are internalized. How you become really outcasted if you are someone who use provocation, for example, as provocation as an artistic tool. We saw now this thing that happened between the National Theatre and Abima Theatre in Israel, and
did you see it?
and I talked with, I remember like
Did you see it?
I saw the excuse or
Yeah.
or the letter. Yeah.
well, one thing was funny because one of these actresses was a colleague, and I saw her in the Norske Teater, she works there, and I said, oh, because apart from what you think about this, I thought she was really good in this video when she portrayed. So I just went there and I said, oh, it was so fun watching it, and it was really good. Also, just to share something about the art of making that video. And she was like, you're one of the few people that want to talk to me about this. No one talks to me, mention this. Everybody pretends this never happened.
And that we know that you're okay, you know,
Yes.
we know you just did this professional, we
We
still
are-
like you, it's okay. We're
we
not
are
just gonna
sorry
talk
for
about
you,
it.
but,
Yeah,
you know,
we're not gonna-
They must be really pissed with it. It's like this subtext, you know.
Yeah.
and-
But this is also what is the thing about when you talk about the membrane and how hard it is to, you know, get through this barrier, about how easy it is to get out.
Yes, it's
Ridiculously easy.
ridiculously easy, and so basically I wanted to the team, and I was very much to sort of reflect between the relationship between the external environment and the internal environment, between what happens when we have utopia to take away problems or take away, call it the enemy in a way, the villain. When you take, and what happens if you really pretend that there's no more villain outside of you, at some point you will end up having the villain in your home, you know, and how hard it is to fight the villain which is really inside you, because then it's can be quite depressing. So this was sort of, and I think it's a theme that in a way it's much bigger than a Norwegian theme. I think it has to do with the relationship between the I and the society, and also their relationship. I mean, it's also a problem of our Western world, capitalistic society, where we are sort of programmed to realize ourselves, to you know, to find out, to always relate to question of talent, for example, to a lot of this individualistic question, and what happens when we have no possibility to problematize that, to take a distance from that, to really understand what is my choice and what is a choice that has been made for me, that I've inherited by, and what is happiness? Why do we have to pursue happiness, to use an American form, and what creates the standards of happiness? Why is and how do we internalize them, this feeling of not being enough, this feeling of not being able to reach into that?
And I think also it's a great giver of angst, you know, fear in general, but also confusion and anxiety.
Yeah. And then to conclude, it has also to do with, I mean, if you analyze this, if you see the world, and we have now a huge also conflict with nature in a way, and our perception of we have also what we call nature is, I mean, in Norway maybe we have 2-3% of real wild nature. I mean, it's still humanized nature. I mean, we really work on, when you go into the forest here in Marka, you don't have the feeling you are in the wildness, even though it's a forest, because we work, we organize nature, we work, we shape it, we make it, we humanize it, you know, and how the need that we have to organize and humanize nature, and how this sort of in a way make us feeling safe, you know, that I can, like I see, for example, pedestrians in Oslo, how they trust that people stop when they cross the road. They don't look. This was one of the fascinating things when I moved here, you know. I could never do this in Rome because you would die, you know. Like, you gotta really make sure they don't drive over you, you know, when you cross this. But here it's so...
You need eye contact.
Yeah, you know, but here, like, it's so... They give their life in the hands of the fact that people will stop because there are traffic rules. They just go and they look at their iPhones, and so how we sort of also humanize this thing about the need to humanize environment, which also means to take away all the information that can sort of disturb us. So create a sort of make it sort of insecure. And when you, for example, if you take a lot of if you drive, the more you drive towards the south of the world or the third world, or call it the way you want, the more you find gaps in this, paradoxes. You find things that are not that can also create sort of, like, I remember we had students, they went to India, and Norwegian students, and some of them, they couldn't get out of the hotel for 2 days. Just because of the feeling and the look of the way things were, you know, and the smells, and this contrast between beauty and ugliness, and this contrast between new things and old things, and you know, how you read environment, and how reading environment has an effect on psychology, and on the way you imagine yourself doing actions in this environment to change it, or to have an impact on that. So I think also, like, to really.
But we don't have to agree with you on all this, do we?
No, we can totally disagree.
Reflect
But
on
this
it.
is my sort of to open up to what has been sort of the inspiration for me to sort of create this frame on darkness, the enemy inside. And of course, as you say, this is more like utgangspunkt, is a starting point, is a sort of
Diving board.
yeah,
The
and then
trampoline.
from a trampoline, and then from here we'll see where this can bring us to. But
Now it's gonna bring us
Yeah.
for lunch.
yes,
Lunch break.
we can think a bit about it. But yes,
Yeah, good. I
okay.
think you managed to get through all
Did
of it.
I manage?
Yeah, I think so.
That's good. Thank you, Sam. Yes. I think the camera fell down, so Albert will really have a
Oh, it just fell down. He still had the sound down. I mean,
No. I think it's good. It's good.
we're not that exciting to watch anyway. are
So
we?
you want to be totally, deconstructed. It will actually have some images and voices and pictures meeting. Okay, we'll stop it.